As a lawyer who failed 8 classes when I was in law school, at CHDs in my last semester, I got 3 tips to share when it comes to presentations, mooting, because you don't do these things just in uni. You also do these things in the PLT as well, so they all apply. So if you don't know, I run the Law School to Lawyer Hub on my blog, lawyerandbuddy.com. I have blog posts for law students like these sort of topics, but very, very soon I will have more blog posts for law graduates, so stay tuned. New blog posts are published every week, by the way. First thing, kind of obvious, but the way to build confidence with any sort of presentation, any sort of verbal assessment, is you gotta know your stuff. So, depending on the presentation, for example, in a PLT, they just mainly focus and mark you more on your verbal skills as opposed to your knowledge. And then for other assessments, uni, TLT, it can be the other way around. They look more at your knowledge rather than the verbal skills. But it doesn't matter which is which. It is gonna help you so much more with your confidence if you know your stuff. So do your research on the legislation it applies. Do your research on the case law that it applies. You don't need to know everything on the dot. You just need to get yourself so familiar with it, because you'll feel so much better if you know what you're talking about. The second thing is you're not going to create a script. Like, you're not going to go by a script, especially when it comes to things like assessments like mooting or something similar to that. Okay, you can't go by a script, because especially if you're in a mooting setting, yeah, like you're basically in a court setting, you're going to be thrown off your script because the magistrate or the judge that is marking you can ask you a question that is going to throw you off the script, and you can't really predict. I mean, you can predict as best you can on what they say, but you can't predict 100% of the time. So instead of having a script, it is good just to have the main dot points, the non-negotiable dot points that you definitely do want to talk about, the things that you definitely want to mention, the non-negotiable case law you want to mention, the non-negotiable legislation you want to mention. It's good to have some non-negotiable dot points, but you don't want to be sticking with a script. That's why the first tip is really helpful. Knowing your stuff is really helpful. So it doesn't matter if you get thrown off the little invisible script that you still would have in your head. You would know on the back of your head things that you can refer back to because you know your stuff. The third tip is more of like a speaking sort of skill. I know when I get nervous, I tend to talk really fast, but things that would help really is just actually speaking slowly and taking your time when speaking, not being afraid of little moments of silence, even though moments like 2 seconds of silence can feel like infinity. But don't be afraid of those things. Sometimes that can actually really help you. Like, the 5 seconds of silence can actually be very beneficial for you to help gather your thoughts, the things that you want to say next. But it will help you a lot better to think through properly